Guts Vorlesh of House Vorlesh, the White Wolf. There was no demon lord he could not face, but this was worse. It was his father. I had given him everything. When the world had taken from him that which was promised, the birthright which had been obscured by those monsters lurking in the abyss, their fear was not misplaced, and neither was their caution. This divine intervention meant he could protect whoever or whatever he wanted. It meant that he was not entirely mortal anymore, and that there was something else which occupied his soul now. The otherworldly had found a place to rest in Guts Vorlesh, and in return they had granted him this opportunity. This bargain was no trick. The merchant bore nothing but aspirations for the White Wolf, that his heir would become renowned in every realm. The phlogiston would know of the White Swordsman. There would be no plain that did not know his name, and from that he could say that he did not fail Brunhilde. Fenrir knew that she would be proud. This was a hero. Their son had earned their name, but he had refused it. I was the father that he chose. The Black Wolf knew that he could not replace what I had given him. Guts Vorlesh would always defer to my judgment. I was the voice that provided guidance when all had been lost. I had won his heart, when all Fenrir had done was win his trust. There was a jealousy. It was as if I had stolen his heir, and there was truth to that. That soul of his would be drawn to my own, and it would forget the Black Wolf. This blood was nothing but a convenience for Guts Vorlesh. He would discard it. That was the price Fenrir had to pay for neglecting his pup. In the absence of a father, the White Wolf found Arlan Vorlesh, and only Arlan Vorlesh. This was the house he would belong to. It was the house that he chose. It was the house that he cherished. In this life, in every life after it, the wolf that I had claimed would hunt in my name. It was most unusual that I would be a crow. These two beasts were always destined for each other. They would even hunt the same prey. The Watcher had to be involved. He loved these parallels in any given situation. Ao was a poet, but it could be grating on the nerves. I wonder if he derived any kind of amusement from this, or if he was surprised in the same way that I was. I had drawn his attention, and I believe I know why. I was a curiosity. I was not predictable, and that was rare. I had become his favorite because he could never decipher the mystery that was Arlan Vorlesh. It was entertainment for certain, but if there was anything more to it than that, I make this prayer. When I am gone, watch over the wolf. May all of his friends know of heaven, and all of his enemies know of hell. Guts Vorlesh has earned that much, and if you do not grant him that reprieve, I will turn this grievous miracle towards those high above and deep below. I will turn it towards you, Ao. That is not a lie. The Watcher broke the silence, but only I could hear him. There was no lie that would ever work on him anyway. That a mortal would have the audacity to threaten any of us three, the ancient brethren. It is unheard of. Ao begins to fade. The grievous miracle is not of my work, but that assessment is not inaccurate. This is most entertaining. I could still hear it. It was a whisper. I will grant it. There was a relief. I did not expect that kind of answer, at best. I had expected to be met with silence for my blasphemy, but instead I had my audience. The Watcher would keep his promise. House Vorlesh would thrive in my absence. Not forever. Nothing lasts for an eternity, and that includes any blessing or boon I may grant. Do not forget that, Arlan Vorlesh. It would be an eon before I could see what fruit this would bear. I won't, Ao. Farewell, and may we meet in circumstances not quite as dire the next time this wheel turns. They are always dire when you are involved. I could not refute that. When were they not? I could scarcely remember any that weren't. Mordenkainen's sword meets Dragon Slayer. These two weapons were at a stalemate. Those dazzling sparks they generate in their clash gives way to the onset of creation. In the distant outskirts of this plane, there are stars that are born from this turbulent conflict. They form into constellations. Nebulae wrap around them in the ether. They had become gyrating galaxies. If nurtured, they would grow into planes. These were nascent universes. Are you ready for everything that may come? I have to see it. The rubies of that crow meet the undecines that belong to the wolf. Our eyes, they were the same. This transformation of his took inspiration from the crow. It had become the template for him, the blueprint by which ascension had been accomplished. The white wolf had mirrored the dark king. This reflection had become flattery, imitation born out of admiration, and love most of all. The path he would tread, it would be the same, that of thorns. It will be painful, but he will endure. Guts Vorlesh was that kind of person, and the reward would be a place to rest at last. Where the journey would end, it would be past the eternity gate. It would be within the Sanctum Imperialis. It would be at a golden throne, where Dragonslayer would pierce a heart thrice. I am ready, Arlan. They had dried. Those tears he had shed were of the past, and he knew what must be done. In that moment he had found his conviction, which had been lost due to doubt. This dragon would not best him. I will do it. Dragonslayer had already earned that name. That title had meaning, and I was to meet my end. The Garden of Gash had been when I felt the bite of it. This would be a reunion. Do not speak of it. Show me what you are. Those words were meaningless. What I needed was action. What you will be when I am gone, the White Wolf of the Sixth Crusade. Guts Vorlesh swings Dragonslayer in a wide arc, and from it a pack of wolves bursts forth. These fire elementals had sworn to serve their master, and they pounce on the anathema. I intone polar midnight, and absolute zero assaults them. When before they had been felled by this spell? They weather the brunt of my magic now and ignore this cold. When Dragonslayer had evolved, they had as well, and they would not be stopped by something like this. If frigid permafrost was not an option, there were always many other avenues by which I could fell my foes. I invoke the necromancy of Soul Reaver. Those fiery wolves become piles of smouldering embers when their souls are torn from their conflagrant bodies and sent to meet Pharasma. I turn my attention towards Guts Vorlesh and make use of the major hex known as Hoarfrost. There are needles of frost that dig into his body. They ignore his armor entirely and render his insides into a turbid sludge. That is when he howls, and from that gale, whirlwind is evoked in turn. The major hex is torn from his frame and becomes part of the cyclone. The spell had assimilated the curse. The White Wolf closes the distance on foot and grabs the Dark King by the throat. The tempest wraps around us, and I am bombarded by mine own effort, the power of my curse melding with the wind and flaying everything that I am. I am deprived of an epidermis, but that was not a problem. I cast the major hex of regenerative sinew and begin to heal. I grab the wolf by the face and intone horrid wilting. All of the moisture inside of his body evaporates, and in that moment of disorientation caused by this, I stab into his ribs with Mordenkainen's sword and puncture one of his lungs. That does not dissuade the White Wolf. Guts Vorlesh brings an elbow down on the blade with all of his strength, and it is broken in half. The plane of force could not withstand it. Dragonslayer relieves me of an arm before I could retaliate. This was the action I had been looking for. The White Swordsman had found his resolve. I unfurl my ebon wings and intone plane shift. The universe around us changes, and we are brought to the fugue plane. I did not want to risk the destruction of Holy Terra, and this was beginning to escalate. I knew what would come next. I draw in all of the ether I can and decide to make use of my own invention. It was rediscovery. This spell had been lost, but I would bring it back. The acquisition of this heart meant that I could bring to bear all of the power I had lost to the God Hand. It was like when I had faced Discari. The Lord of Locusts had proven to be my rival, but he failed to withstand my vengeance. He had fallen to my rancor. I evoke Memento Mori. I had been inspired by absolute death and decided that I would venture towards emulating it. This did not require any incantation or hand gesture. It was the purity of death distilled into a wish for the demise of another. The power of it meant the death of all things. It would be an insult if I held back. The wolf had to defeat the crow, and that meant I could not forfeit anything in this war. The son was to surpass the father, not the shadow of what he once was, but as he was truly now. The knight commander of the Fifth Crusade, the fugue plane was protected by Kelemvor, the judge of the damned. He differed from Pharasma and did not share her disdain for mortals like myself, which is why I entrust him with the lives of those dwelling within this realm, whether they were faithless or not. This spell would not harm them. They had his protection. I direct all of that negative energy on Guts Vorlesh, and he collapses to the ground, but not completely. The White Wolf was on his knees, and he used his great sword as a crutch. There was a fire inside of him that could not be smothered by any necromancy. His heart may have stopped, but his will would never be extinguished. This death would not prevent him from doing his duty. That promise he made would not be broken. Calder Vorlesh would have a brother in the wolf, and he would stand by his side. This he had sworn. That was his oath, the pledge he made to his father. The storm of vengeance had come, and it would feed the flames of Dragon Slayer. They became an eye of the storm, and I would meet it. This spell which had been invented to conquer any adversary. I cast dire winter and bring about a tumultuous ice age. This spell had become the most powerful in my arsenal. Polar midnight did not compare, and even if I had made use of conduit surge, it would not be able to compete with this, whereas that spell could destroy every future, not unlike Dragon Slayer could destroy the past. This one annihilated all concept of movement, whether it was physical or metaphysical. The abstract was no exception to this, and neither were any concepts. The blazing tornado collides against a blizzard of Arctic chill, and the plane nearly gives. If not for divine intervention, it would have been unmade by this exchange of power between these expressions of the grievous miracle. We are both caught in it, and we are nearly destroyed. It was as if an unstoppable force met an immovable object, and the result was mutual destruction. Those raven wings of mine had been burned away, and that armor the wolf had received from me was reduced to molten slag. The metal had fused to his body, Dragon Slayer having been lost in this anarchy and flung to some distant part of the multiverse. I stood only as Arlan Vorlesh, and I faced Guts Vorlesh, who stood only as himself. It was not over. When we approached each other, there were no words, only violence. There was a fist for a fist. We struck each other. I aimed for that wound I inflicted, where I had stabbed Mordenkainen's sword into his ribs. It bleeds when I plunge my fist into it. The wolf is relentless as he tears into the stump where one of my arms had been before it was severed by Dragon Slayer, those teeth tearing into it with an animalistic frenzy. Any stratagem had fled. What remained was primal. I make use of conduit surge and embolden the spell known as transformation. I forgo all of the arcane in favor of this enchantment, which bolsters everything that I am. Guts Vorlesh meets this effort and begins to shapeshift. This was no dire wolf like I had seen him become before, but a werewolf of the lunar cycle. That fragment of Mordenkainen's sword which had been lodged into his lung, it is ejected from his body, and the wound is healed by this metamorphosis. The melted armor falls away to reveal fur. The arm I had lost. It had grown back. Transformation outstripped the power of my regenerative sinew. I am a blur as I move. The distance between us is erased, and an uppercut to the jaw sends the werewolf into the firmament. When he hurtles into a nearby galaxy, he is able to adjust his flight and land against the outer rim of it. The lycanthrope leaps from it, and those claws were ready to tear out my throat. I use the space-time continuum as a springboard when I jump, launching myself into the depths of outer space and ricochet across the cosmos, rebounding between these galaxies. When the two of us meet, there is a cross-counter, our fists pulverizing the face of the other. We are both flung across the expanse of this universe by the force of our blows, colliding against the opposite ends of it, and slam into the veil barring entry to the rest of the multiverse. I make use of Dragon's Roar. It was no spell, and had been amplified by the enchantment I was under. The cacophony of it shakes this universe, and it echoes everywhere. It could be heard throughout Elysium, and even the 9 hells. The veil is broken by it, and I tackle into the wolf. We fly into the phlogiston, and the myriad of crystal spheres. The white wolf could see it. Dragon Slayer had been hurled into this place between the many planes. Guts Vorlesh flies towards it, and reaches out with his claws. Their bond was unbreakable. The great sword, as if magnetized by this gesture, is drawn towards him. I do my best to intercept it, but it was too far. I had the advantage of finesse, but not of distance. It had been a mistake, one that would prove fatal when I strike with my fist. Dragon Slayer is there to meet my charge. The great sword pierces through it and into my heart. There is shock on my face. This defeat had been true. I had lost. What a wonderful thing. I speak in my death throes. This is your apotheosis. It was never mine. I had felt it, the pride of parenthood. This was my successor. He would inherit all that I am. If I may, I use what arm I had left and ruffle his hair with my hand. I always wanted to do this. What father did not? Guts Vorlesh sinks into this misery. There would be grief. He catches my body as I fall onto him, and there is a whine, which becomes a whimper, and then it would transform into a wail of anguish. There was no realm that did not hear it. This cry, the white wolf would mourn. Why did you make me do this? Uatap tua, Arlan Vorlua. The idea of evil can only scream. I had denied it, that purpose which it desired above all other things. It would die bereft of that, and I felt satisfaction. I had won, and this was all that it cost. This trade had been worth it.